Welcome to Perception. This is your space to pause, to breathe, and to look at life from a different perspective. For the next few minutes, there is nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to prove, and nothing expected of you. Just one quiet conversation. Take a slow breath, and let's begin. There are nights when the world is completely silent, but your mind isn't. The room is dark. The phone is face down on the bedside table. Outside, the city has finally slowed to a whisper. Yet somehow, inside your head, another day has just begun. A conversation from last week keeps replaying. A decision you haven't made feels more urgent than ever. You wonder if you're falling behind. If you're wasting your potential. If people secretly think less of you than they say. You remember a mistake from years ago as though it happened this morning. Then your thoughts leap into the future. What if the interview doesn't go well? What if this relationship doesn't last? What if I never become the person I hoped I would be? One thought becomes 3. 3 become 10. Before long, you're exhausted. Not because anything happened, but because your mind has traveled through dozens of imaginary futures without ever leaving the bed. Perhaps you've noticed something strange. The hardest battles in life are often invisible. No one sees the arguments you have with yourself. No one hears the endless what ifs. No one notices how many versions of tomorrow you've already lived before breakfast. From the outside, you seem perfectly fine. You go to work. You answer messages. You smile at friends. You laugh at jokes. But somewhere beneath that ordinary routine, your mind rarely rests. And maybe that's why overthinking feels so lonely. It's difficult to explain to someone else. Because nothing appears wrong. Yet everything feels heavy. Sometimes we believe we're overthinking because we care. Because we're responsible. Because we're trying to make the right choice. But what if there comes a point where thinking stops helping? And quietly begins stealing the very life we're trying to protect? Imagine standing beside a beautiful lake. The water is naturally calm. You can see the sky reflected perfectly. Now imagine picking up a stick and stirring the water over and over again. Soon the reflection disappears. The surface becomes cloudy. Nothing outside the lake has changed. Only the movement inside it. Our minds can become like that lake. The more we stir every possibility, every memory, every fear, the harder it becomes to see clearly. Maybe peace isn't something we have to create. Maybe it's something that quietly returns when we stop disturbing it. Hold on to that thought. We'll come back to it. But first, let me tell you a story. Not because it's extraordinary, but because it might feel surprisingly familiar. His name is Daniel. He's 32. If you met him, you probably wouldn't think anything was wrong. He has a stable job. A small apartment. A few close friends. A family who checks in every Sunday. His life looks normal. Yet every morning begins the same way. Before his feet touch the floor, he reaches for his phone. Emails. News headlines. Messages. Social media. Someone from university has launched another business. A colleague just posted photos from a holiday in Italy. Another friend announced an engagement. Another bought a house. Daniel stares for a moment longer than he realizes. Then he puts the phone down. A quiet thought slips into his mind. Everyone seems to know where they're going except me. He doesn't say it out loud. He doesn't even fully notice it. But that one sentence follows him through the rest of the day. At work, his manager asks if they can have a quick meeting tomorrow morning. It's an ordinary request. Nothing unusual. But by lunchtime, Daniel has imagined at least 6 different reasons. Maybe I've made a mistake. Maybe they're cutting jobs. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe they've finally realized someone else could do this better. His concentration disappears. He rereads the same email 3 times. He forgets simple tasks. By evening, he's mentally exhausted. Not because of work, but because of possibilities that exist only inside his imagination. Later that night, a friend sends a short message. Sorry, can't make dinner tonight. That's it. No explanation. No extra detail. Daniel reads it again. Then again. Did I do something? Are they avoiding me? Were they just being polite all these years? He starts writing a reply. Deletes it. Writes another. Deletes that too. For 20 minutes, he tries to answer a question that doesn't even exist. Eventually, he places the phone on the table. The apartment is quiet. Too quiet. He walks to the kitchen and pours himself a glass of water. As he stands by the window, he notices the city lights stretching into the distance. Hundreds of apartments. Hundreds of windows. Hundreds of people living lives he knows nothing about. For a brief moment, he wonders, how many of them are doing exactly what I'm doing? How many are standing by another window, convincing themselves that tomorrow will somehow go wrong? The thought comforts him. Just a little. But not enough. Because once he climbs into bed, his mind resumes where it left off. He thinks about a conversation with his father from months ago. His father had said, almost casually, "You've always been too hard on yourself." At the time, Daniel laughed. Now those words echo differently. Too hard on yourself. He turns onto one side. Then the other. He closes his eyes. His body is tired. But his mind keeps searching. Searching for certainty. Searching for reassurance. Searching for answers that tomorrow cannot possibly give tonight. Have you ever noticed how overthinking promises clarity, yet almost always delivers confusion instead? It tells us, just think a little longer. Soften every risk. Find every possible answer. But the finish line keeps moving. Every answer creates another question. Every solved problem gives birth to a new worry. It's like trying to smooth the surface of water with your hands. The harder you try, the more ripples you create. The next morning, Daniel arrives at work carrying invisible weight. His manager smiles and invites him into the office. "We wanted to thank you," she says. "You've handled a difficult project really well. We'd like you to lead the next one." Daniel smiles politely. But inside, something strange happens. Instead of relief, his mind immediately whispers, "What if I disappoint them?" Even good news becomes another reason to worry. Isn't that remarkable? Sometimes the problem isn't what life gives us. Sometimes it's the lens through which we receive it. And perhaps you've experienced this too. A compliment that somehow becomes pressure. A new opportunity that feels like another test. A quiet evening interrupted by imaginary disasters. A happy moment overshadowed by the fear of losing it. Little by little, we begin living less in reality, and more inside the stories our minds create. The difficult part is that these stories often sound convincing. They wear the voice of logic. They pretend to be preparation. They disguise themselves as responsibility. But beneath all those disguises is something much simpler. A longing to feel safe. A longing to know that nothing painful will happen. It's one of the most human desires we have. And yet, life has never offered that kind of certainty. Not to kings. Not to artists. Not to parents. Not to students. Not to any of us. The question, then, isn't how to predict every outcome. The question is, how do we find peace without needing to know what comes next? That question has quietly followed humanity for centuries. And somewhere within it lies a perspective that doesn't ask us to stop thinking, only to stop letting our thoughts become our prison. We'll explore that perspective together. There is something quietly comforting about realizing that your mind isn't broken. It's simply doing what it was designed to do. Long before cities, offices, smartphones, and endless notifications, the human mind evolved to notice danger. It remembered painful experiences. It searched for patterns. It imagined what might happen next. Back then, this helped us survive. If our ancestors ignored the rustling in the bushes, the consequences could be serious. If they remembered which path led to danger, they lived another day. The mind became incredibly good at asking one question. What could go wrong? Thousands of years later, our world has changed far more quickly than our minds have. The dangers are different now. Instead of wild animals, we worry about unanswered emails. Instead of finding food, we worry about keeping our jobs. Instead of surviving the winter, we worry about whether we're successful enough, attractive enough, accomplished enough, or simply, enough. The mind doesn't always know the difference between a real threat and an imagined one. It reacts to both. And that's why a single unanswered message can create the same racing heart that genuine danger once did. But there's something even more subtle happening. We have slowly confused thinking with control. When life feels uncertain, thinking feels productive. It feels as though we're doing something. Planning. Analyzing. Preparing. Yet there comes a point where thinking stops being a tool, and quietly becomes a habit. Imagine sitting in a rocking chair. You're moving constantly. Your body never stops. Yet you're not actually going anywhere. Overthinking feels exactly like that. Movement without progress. Activity without peace. Daniel didn't realize this. Most of us don't. He believed that if he could just think enough, he would finally arrive at certainty. But certainty kept slipping away. Because certainty isn't something the future promises. It's something the present quietly asks us to practice. There is a beautiful idea from Marcus Aurelius that feels surprisingly gentle when you first hear it. He reminds himself that we often suffer not because of events themselves, but because of the judgments we attach to them. Think about that for a moment. Two people can experience the very same situation and walk away carrying completely different emotions. One person receives criticism and sees proof that they have failed. Another receives the same criticism and sees an opportunity to learn. The event is identical. The meaning is different. Marcus wasn't suggesting that pain isn't real. He knew suffering intimately. Loss, illness, responsibility, grief. He experienced all of them. But he noticed something important. Between what happens to us and how we experience it, there is a space. In that space lives our interpretation. And that interpretation quietly shapes our reality. Daniel had never noticed this space. When his manager scheduled a meeting, his mind immediately decided what it meant. When a friend cancelled dinner, his imagination finished the story before reality had a chance to speak. He wasn't reacting to life. He was reacting to his own predictions about life. How often do we do the same? Someone walks past without saying hello. They must be upset with me. A partner seems quieter than usual. I've done something wrong. An application takes longer than expected. I'll never get it. Notice how quickly the mind fills in missing pieces. Almost as though silence itself feels unbearable. Yet silence isn't evidence. It's simply space. And our minds have become very good at filling empty spaces with fear. Imagine reading only the first page of a novel and deciding you already know how it ends. It would sound unreasonable. Yet that's exactly what overthinking asks us to do every day. We receive one small piece of information and invent the rest. Marcus Aurelius gently invites us to interrupt that habit. Not by pretending everything will be fine, but by asking a quieter question. Is this what actually happened? Or is this only my interpretation? Those few words create room to breathe. They don't erase uncertainty. They loosen its grip. The next time anxiety begins telling a story, pause before believing it. Ask yourself, what facts do I actually know? You might discover that the frightening story inside your mind has very little evidence supporting it. That single pause can change the direction of an entire day. A few weeks after the meeting with his manager, Daniel found himself sitting in a small cafe before work. He had left home early by accident. Normally he would have reached for his phone immediately. Instead, he simply watched. A woman laughed with her young daughter over spilled hot chocolate. An elderly man carefully folded a newspaper before helping another customer carry a heavy bag. Two strangers held the door open for one another without exchanging a word. Life continued quietly around him. Nobody seemed to be rushing toward the perfect future his mind was always chasing. For a few unexpected minutes, Daniel wasn't trapped inside tomorrow. He was simply watching today. It felt unfamiliar. Almost uncomfortable. But strangely peaceful. He realized something. The world outside his mind was much quieter than the world inside it. Perhaps you've experienced this too. Walking through a park. Watching rain against a window. Listening to birds before the city fully wakes. For a brief moment, the endless commentary disappears. Nothing magical has happened. Life hasn't become easier. But your attention has returned to where life is actually unfolding. Right here. Right now. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to return to the present moment. Not because the future didn't matter, but because this moment is the only place where we can actually live, choose, or act. The future exists as possibility. The past exists as memory. Only this breath, this conversation, this step, is real. When we forget that, overthinking quietly steals today in exchange for a tomorrow that hasn't arrived. Here's another image to carry with you. Imagine holding a snow globe. Each anxious thought is another shake. You keep shaking because you're desperate to see clearly. Yet every movement sends more snow swirling through the glass. The harder you search for clarity, the cloudier everything becomes. What finally allows the snow to settle? Not more shaking. Stillness. The same is often true of the mind. We don't always need another answer. Sometimes we simply need enough quiet for the answers already within us to become visible. That kind of quiet isn't found by escaping life. It's found by changing the way we meet it. There is another perspective from Marcus Aurelius that feels especially relevant in a world that constantly asks us to predict, compare, and control. He reminds himself to focus only on what truly belongs to him. His own choices. His own character. His own actions. Everything else. The opinions of others. The outcome of events. The behavior of strangers. The passing judgments of the world. Belongs outside his control. At first, this sounds almost too simple. But imagine carrying two backpacks. One contains responsibilities that genuinely belong to you. Your effort. Your honesty. Your kindness. Your discipline. The other backpack is filled with things you cannot control. Whether everyone likes you. Whether someone misunderstands your intentions. Whether the economy changes. Whether people appreciate your work. Most of us carry both. No wonder we're exhausted. Daniel had spent years carrying the second backpack without realizing it. Every opinion mattered. Every possibility demanded attention. Every imagined future became another stone in a bag that was never his to carry. Slowly, he began asking himself a new question whenever anxiety appeared. Is this actually mine to carry? Sometimes the answer was yes. If he had made a mistake, he could apologize. If he had work to do, he could begin. If someone needed kindness, he could offer it. But many worries received a different answer. No. That belongs to tomorrow. No. That belongs to another person's choices. No. That belongs to chance. Each time he recognized the difference, it felt as though he quietly set down another unnecessary weight. Not all at once. Just one stone at a time. And perhaps that's how real change happens. Not through one dramatic breakthrough. But through dozens of gentle decisions repeated every day. A thought appears. You notice it. You question it. You choose not to follow it. Then you return. To this breath. This conversation. This moment. Again. And again. Until, one day, you realize your mind is no longer running the entire show. It has finally learned something it had forgotten long ago. How to be still. In the next part of our conversation, we'll explore why chasing perfection often fuels overthinking, how self-compassion can become a quiet form of strength, and the simple daily practices inspired by Marcus Aurelius that can help transform these ideas into a calmer way of living. Perhaps the most surprising thing about overthinking is that it rarely begins with fear alone. Sometimes, it begins with love. We overthink because we care about the people around us. We replay conversations because we don't want to hurt anyone. We imagine every possible future because we hope to avoid pain. We chase certainty because we want life to unfold gently. There is something deeply human about that. So this conversation isn't asking you to stop caring. It's asking something much kinder. Can you care without carrying the weight of everything you cannot control? Marcus Aurelius returns to this idea again and again, reminding himself that our peace depends less on what happens around us and more on the way we choose to meet it. That choice isn't made once. It's made every day. Sometimes every hour. Sometimes every few minutes. And that doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Think back to Daniel. Nothing extraordinary had changed about his life. He still had deadlines. Unexpected bills. Family expectations. Moments of doubt. Difficult conversations. The world hadn't suddenly become easier. But something inside him had begun to shift. Instead of treating every anxious thought like an emergency, he started treating it like a visitor. Some visitors bring helpful advice. Others simply knock loudly before leaving. Not every knock deserves an invitation inside. When a worrying thought appeared, Daniel no longer rushed to argue with it. Nor did he blindly believe it. He simply noticed it. There you are again. The fear of failure. The need for approval. The habit of predicting disaster. He acknowledged it. And then returned his attention to whatever life was asking of him in that moment. Sometimes that meant answering an email. Sometimes it meant listening more carefully to a friend. Sometimes it meant finishing his morning coffee before it grew cold. These small moments didn't look impressive. No one applauded them. But quietly, they changed the direction of his days. Because peace is rarely built through dramatic moments. More often, it's built through ordinary moments that receive our full attention. There is another gentle lesson woven through the reflections of Marcus Aurelius. He often reminds himself that life is astonishingly brief. Not to make us afraid, but to wake us up. How much of your life has already been spent inside arguments that never happened? How many beautiful mornings disappeared beneath worries about an afternoon that turned out just fine? How many joyful conversations were interrupted because your thoughts wandered somewhere else? If someone offered you a precious gift, you would probably hold it carefully. You wouldn't leave it forgotten in a drawer. Yet each ordinary day may be one of the most valuable gifts we ever receive. The tragedy isn't that life is short. It's that we often postpone living until everything finally feels certain. I'll relax after this project. I'll be happy when I earn more. I'll enjoy life once everything settles down. But life has a quiet habit of replacing one uncertainty with another. The perfect moment rarely announces itself. The present moment does. Again. And again. And again. Marcus gently reminds us to meet it. Not someday. Today. Maybe you've noticed something while listening. We haven't talked about eliminating anxiety forever. Because that isn't how being human works. Thoughts will still appear. Some mornings will still feel heavy. Certain nights will still be restless. The goal isn't to silence the mind completely. The goal is to stop allowing every thought to become a command. Imagine standing beside a busy road. Cars continue passing. Some are loud. Some are quiet. But you don't chase every single one. You simply watch them pass. Thoughts can be like those cars. You don't have to climb into every vehicle that stops in front of you. Some thoughts deserve your attention. Others can continue down the road without you. That simple shift changes everything. Because awareness creates freedom. The moment you notice a thought instead of becoming it, you've already begun to loosen its grip. There is one final perspective from Marcus Aurelius that feels especially comforting. He reminds himself that the quality of our life is shaped by the quality of our thoughts. Notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't ask for perfect thoughts. Only better ones. Kinder ones. More honest ones. More useful ones. That distinction matters. Many people overthink because they believe they must become perfect before they deserve peace. Perfect employee. Perfect partner. Perfect parent. Perfect student. Perfect friend. Yet perfection keeps moving further away. Marcus offers a quieter path. Instead of asking, "Am I perfect?" perhaps ask, "Am I becoming a little wiser than yesterday?" Growth isn't measured by never feeling anxious again. It's measured by how gently you return when anxiety appears. It's measured by choosing one calmer response today than you chose last week. One kinder word to yourself. One unnecessary worry released. One more moment fully lived. Those small choices accumulate. Like drops of water filling a quiet lake. You may not notice the change immediately. But over time, they reshape the landscape of your inner world. Before we finish, I'd like to leave you with a few questions. Not because they have easy answers, but because some questions are meant to stay with us. Take a slow breath. And if it feels right, allow these questions to settle gently. What worry have you been carrying that doesn't truly belong to today? Whose approval are you still waiting for before allowing yourself to feel enough? If your closest friends spoke to themselves the way you sometimes speak to yourself, what would you say to them? What would change if you treated your own mind with the same patience you offer someone you love? And perhaps the quietest question of all, if nothing about your circumstances changed tomorrow, could you still choose one moment of peace today? Not all day. Just one moment. Because sometimes one peaceful moment becomes another. And another. Until what once felt impossible begins to feel familiar. When Daniel walked home that evening, the city looked exactly as it always had. Cars moved through crowded streets. People hurried toward trains. Shop windows reflected the fading light. Nothing outside had transformed. Yet something inside had become lighter. His problems hadn't disappeared. His future remained uncertain. He still didn't know every answer. But for the first time in a long while, he no longer believed he needed to. As he reached his apartment building, he looked up at the evening sky. Clouds drifted slowly across the fading blue. He smiled. Not because life was perfect, but because he had stopped demanding that it be. Sometimes peace arrives quietly. Not with fireworks. Not with certainty. But with a single decision. To come back. To this breath. This step. This ordinary moment. Again. And again. Perhaps that's what Marcus Aurelius had been reminding himself all along. Not to control life. Not to predict every tomorrow. But to meet each day with steadiness, honesty, and presence. And perhaps that's enough. Perhaps it has always been enough. The world may not change tomorrow, but the way you see it can. And sometimes, a new perception is the beginning of a new life. Thank you for spending these moments with perception. If this conversation gave you even one new way of looking at life, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, take care of your mind. Be kind to yourself. And keep seeing life differently.